Hello everyone and thanks for joining me once again in this video. Today we will discuss typography and I would like to show you the latest improvements I made to the plugin to make your life extremely easy when using typography in your design. This was made because of many user requests and feedback. So if you have ideas, feature requests, please leave them on the OxyProps feedback website. You will find the link in the description. And now let's go to our OxyProps dashboard. So you will already notice a few differences. I did modify the layout because we needed a little more room. And let's go directly to the typography control panel just below the color. This is a fresh install. I did not change any setting. I only activated the OxyProps global settings. This option deletes and replaces Oxygen default global settings. That's why it's unchecked by default to avoid overriding your global settings if you already have set any. So it's up to you. And let's go back to our typography. And from this dashboard, you can control the full OxyProps fluid typography system with 5 parameters. And I will show you what is each parameter. This central area displays a preview of the different fluid sizes. And we have the desktop preview on the right, which is what the size will be at the largest breakpoint defined by your Oxygen page width global setting. And the mobile preview shows the font size at the smallest breakpoint defined by the mobile breakpoint in your Oxygen global setting. The fluid sizes go from 00 to 8. They match the static range. And just for reference, you can see that size 5 is used by default for H1, size 4 for H2, etc. And size 0 is used for body text and H6. I said the range goes to size 8, so 6, 7, 8 are not visible for now. And as they are very big, that can be disturbing. In the dashboard, they are hidden, but if you want to display, you just click the button and now they are visible and we can hide them again. So it's easier to configure the parameter. So let's start with the first parameter, which is the base font size. And by default, it's set to 1. You have here a preview of the size of a standard text that is set to 1 rem, which is most of the time equivalent to 16 pixels. So this parameter defines a ratio for your base font size and a ratio to the user browser setting. By default, most browsers have a default font size of 16 pixels, but for accessibility reasons, some users can define a different value if they need bigger fonts. So this parameter is a multiplier for this base font. So simply by moving the slider, you can define your base font. So if I set the base font to 1.4, my base font will be 1.4 times the default font set in your browser. And you notice that when I move my base font, the whole scale is affected because everything is calculated with this base font size as a reference. So let's go to maybe 1.2. So that is our first parameter. The second one is the font scale ratio. This one defines how fast the font size grows from one side to the other. By default, it's set to 133, and here again I can take my slider and move it to the right so the size grows faster, or to the left so the sizes grow slower. If you want, you can use presets, and presets are based on harmonics and cover a full octave from perfect 1, which is flat, everything has the same size, to perfect 8, a full octave, which doubles the size with each size increase. That's a lot. And of course, you have all other presets. So for now, let's decide to go for a major 3, which is 1.25, or a ratio of 5 to 4 for our size growth. The third parameter is the mobile to desktop ratio. This defines the amplitude of size between all of your breakpoints. 1.75, like this, means that the desktop version of a size 5 is 1.75 times bigger than the mobile version of the same size. So with this parameter, you can decide how fast or how slow your fluid size will vary across breakpoints. If I reduce the ratio, I reduce the difference between mobile and desktop, and at 1, I will have the exact same size on desktop and on mobile. And the other way, if I go to 2, I will have here the maximum difference, and my desktop version of the size will be twice as big as the mobile version. Let's stick to a minor seventh, and let's go to the last parameter, which is the absolute minimum size. And this parameter defines a barrier, or a bottom limit if you prefer, below which the size is not allowed to go. So for now, I have a base font of 1.2, an absolute minimum of 0.6, meaning that at minimum, a font size can be half my base font size, but never less than this size. And we can see the effect by looking at the mobile preview. If I increase the absolute minimum, you will see the smallest size increasing as I hit this minimum value. Okay, so for now, let's say that I want an absolute minimum of 0.8 rem. Okay, so with those 4 parameters, the base font, the absolute minimum, and the font scale, and the mobile to desktop ratio, you define the full system. Now there is a 5th parameter, which is the heading to subheading ratio. I did create a parallel font size scale to use with subheadings. Of course, you can use it wherever you want, but the idea when I created it was to use it for subheadings. So we have this parallel scale, and when you have a size 5, you also have a size 5s, or size 5 sub for the subheading. And this 5th parameter defines the ratio between a heading and its subheading. So here it's defined to 0.5, meaning that the subheading will be half the size of the same heading. Here again, you have the mobile preview and the desktop preview. The difference between the two depends on the mobile to desktop ratio, of course. But then the visual difference between the heading and the subheadings is set by this ratio. And on the preview, I created 2 lines, one with standard case, one with uppercase, because of course, when you decide for a design to use uppercase for subheadings, there's a big visual difference between the two for the same font size. So by adjusting this slider, you can see, let's remove the selection, what your subheadings will look compared to the headings. So maybe if you want to go for a standard case, 0.8 is okay compared to the heading. But if I want my subheadings to be uppercase, this is certainly too big, and I will go with 0.5. And when I am happy with the parameters for my system, I can save the changes. And now let's go and have a look in Oxygen. Here we are in Oxygen. I did create a simple section with headings and text. We have our 6 headings from H1 to H6 and 3 paragraphs. The middle one has no specific styling, so it uses the default base size, which is by default a fluid font 0. This one is a 00, and this one is a fluid font 1. First, let's have a look at our global settings for the headings. As I did activate OxyProps global settings, all values are linked to the framework. And if I go and look at the font size, we can see that my H1 is a var, of course, calling a CSS custom property, _o-fluid-font. Let's go and have a look at the H2, _o-fluid-font, and H3 is the same one. Okay, I won't show you all of them, but you get the point. There is no difference in the default value assigned to the headings. And if we go and see the body text, it's the same custom property assigned to the body text. So by default, if you just want to trust the system, you have set your parameters in the dashboard, design your page, and all your heading will be consistent over your site and follow the parameters you defined in your plugin dashboard. If we go to the front end, this is what our page looks like. And if in my dashboard I change my font scale ratio to something more extreme, like this one, for example, and I save changes, back to our front end, let's refresh, and the parameters are reflected all over the site. Our headings grow faster, and our text also grow faster. Let's come back to our major third, save. And back to Oxygen, of course, I can select a heading, and for this specific one, change the font size. You notice that our font size context menu did update also to match those new fluid font ranges. So you will find the font size fluid from 00 to 8. You will find the subheading versions from 00 to 8S, and the static one or fixed one. I don't know what is the best word. Maybe static would be the best one. But let's say that I want my heading one to be, let's go wild and define a size 8, and here I get a very big heading 1. If I delete the value, I'm back to the system default. And just to remind you what I said earlier, by default, I match H1 to a fluid font 5, H2 to a fluid font 4, H3 to a fluid font 3, etc. But maybe you want something different. You like very big headings compared to your text, for example, and you want to modify the range. Of course, this is feasible. You can come to your global settings and say that your H1, by default, it's a 5, you want a 7. Your H2 will be a 6, your H3 will be a 5, etc., etc. I can save, have a look at the front end. Let's refresh. So now I'm still using my fluid font scale, but I have created a gap between 4 and 3 because that's a size 7, 6, 5. H4 is a 2, 1, and 0. So in this configuration, I'm not using size 3 and size 4. But if I go to my dashboard and change the ratio, let's increase it to a perfect 4, for example. Save the changes, back to my front end, let's refresh. And it's still working because I modified the individual values, but these are still values from my fluid typography scale. So they are still responsive to the parameters, but also responsive to the viewport change. If I want to, I can define anything I want. I don't know, 16 rem, for example. I can do this, that's possible, but this will not be a fluid font anymore. If I do that, save, back to my front end. This one is a huge, massive static heading, and then we have the fluid one. We can check this by reducing the viewport, and of course this one is not adjusting when the other one are responsive. So let's go back to the original state very quick. Let's save, and here we are, back to our fluid font with no specific value, and we let the system work by itself. Now let's go and have a look to the next section, and in the next section I have two things. First thing I have is of course my headings, but I also have the subheadings. So my heading of course is a H1 defined by its tag, and my subheading, okay, it has a custom class to style it. I defined a color that is my accent color with a 60% transparency. I also defined a font weight of 300, and I made the text uppercase. And as the text is uppercase, I also added some letter spacing, and I reduced the line height. But what makes my text a subheading 1 is this class here, sub H1. The subheading classes are registered, so they will be suggested when you start typing. So if I start typing sub, you see the class appearing. And by the way, I did improve the keyboard navigation, so it's now much better, because from here I can either press tab or the down arrow key, and I can navigate and select it either by pressing enter or the space bar or the right arrow key. Okay, this was just to mention this little fix. So that's important because this class, sub H1, is what links this text to my H1. And that's because of this class that this subheading will have a size that adapts to my H1 size based on the ratio I did define. Let's save, have a look at the front end. Here we are. And back to my dashboard, if I change my ratio and I reduce to 0.3, for example. And by the way, on all of these sliders, you can, if you want to achieve a specific precise value, use your keyboard and the up and down arrow keys to achieve the exact value you want. 0.3, let's save, back to the front end, refresh, and my subheadings did all adapt. Back to my default. And now let's discuss something important, which is at the core of the OxyProps framework, is that OxyProp is built on the design token concept and even more on the multiple layer of design tokens. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I made a video, the link should pop up at the corner and you will have a link in the description also. One of the many benefits of using CSS custom properties, and in this case let's call them CSS variables, is that as they are variables you can redefine their values. And because we are working with CSS, and that in CSS you have the principle of the cascade and inheritance, your CSS variables are scoped to the element where you are redefining the value, and with the inheritance principle to the element children. And that's also the case for OxyProps fluid font system. So how does it work? Well, we have our first section here, and let's keep it as a reference. For now, all my headings, all my text, when I have the same level, of course, have the same size. They are all H1s, H2, sub H1, sub H2s, etc. But let's imagine that for some design reasons, at this section level, and only for this section, but it could be also for my page, I want to redefine things. Let's select my section and we will go to the custom CSS panel. And here we can come and start writing the name of the custom prop from the framework, but I decided to make things easy for you and I modified the custom CSS context menu. So you just have to right click and you have this line now, which is the fluid typo props. And you will find the 5 parameters from the dashboard that completely define the system. So first, let's call the base text size. Default is 1, but in this section, I want my base text size to be 1.4 and it adjusts. Now I want my absolute minimum, why not, to be 0.5. I want my growing ratio to be 1.45. I want my subheadings ratio to be 0.5. And maybe I want my mobile to desktop ratio to be 3. Save and have a look at the front end. Our first section for reference did not change at all. Still using the global defaults, but at this section level, by redefining our 5 system parameters, we can completely redefine the fluid font system, and this is scoped to this section. Let's reduce it a little, okay? And now another benefit from the system is that you can nest your variables and redefine them on an infinity of level of depth. So for example, let's select our card. The card is inside the section, and for my card I can go to my custom CSS and here again modify my base size to 1, my absolute minimum to 1, my ratio to 1.6 to 1.4, my subheading ratio to 0.6 and my mobile to desktop to 1.3. Back to my front end, let's refresh. And now I have my default site-wide fluid font system on my first section. I have a redefined fluid font system at my section level, and I have another one at my card level. And that's the beauty of CSS custom properties when they are actually used as CSS variables with a multi-layer design token philosophy in mind. I said the beauty because I actually think that's beautiful. I hope I'm not alone. So please tell me in the comments if you like it too and if you find it beautiful. And here we are at full screen, but let's have a look at how responsive this is. And we can see that the system adapts, and we also can see the effect of the different mobile to desktop ratio. At the section level, I did define a big ratio, so there's a big difference between mobile and desktop. And on the card, I did define a small ratio. That's why the text sizes in my card didn't reduce as much as they did at the section level when reducing the viewport. And that's the new evolution of the fluid font system of OxyProps. At the time this video is published, the update should be available from your plugin dashboard. Tell me in the comments what you think, what could be improved further. Use the OxyProps feedback website for your ideas and suggestions. If you liked the video, if you learned something, please press the like button. Consider subscribing to the channel for more videos like this one. Click the bell for the notification, you know all that stuff. And I'll see you in the next video.